All right, we're live, and we have one person so far. So I was trying to figure out how to stream this on LinkedIn and YouTube at the same time, and that's where I got I got thrown off. I was like, all right, that's just way too technical for me. We'll just give it a few minutes. We have 4 people so far, so we'll just give it a few minutes. Hi, everyone, and welcome to my first Substack Live. Thanks for joining us. We've got some great guests today, so really excited to answer your questions. We will be taking questions, so as many as we possibly can. So if you have them, feel free to go ahead and put them in the chat, and we'll try to take them after we do a bit of a brief intro and overview. Laura, Cindy, have you guys ever done a live like this before?
Nope. No, this is my first Substack Live. I've done a couple
But have
of
you done a live
panels.
otherwise?
Yeah.
Like on YouTube or LinkedIn?
I've done recordings of podcasts and I've done live panels, but I've never done something like this.
Okay,
I've never
So
even
it's the
done a
first-
Facebook Live or an Instagram Live. Nothing.
No, neither have I. So it's a first for all of us. All right, great. So we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone, to our first live broadcast on Reimagine Success. So for those of you that have been longtime followers of Reimagine Success, or for those of you that are new, just a little bit of a intro to the reason for Reimagine Success. So the whole point of Reimagine Success is to challenge what is, I believe, generally our unhealthy relationship with work, success, and achievement. This is not about demonizing ambition or demonizing work. We all have great ambition, and work is essential to our lives. This is about building a healthy relationship with work, success, and achievement. We can have unhealthy relationships with anything: food, people, our environment, our phones. And so how do we build a healthy and nurturing relationship with work, success, and achievement? Now, also, I often talk about how to do that, but this call is actually about, what's happening in the job market. It's really tough out there. A lot of people are struggling. They have a lot of questions about what's happening, and there's really nowhere to go. So, where do you take those questions? And so, unless you're an HR practitioner, or your partner is one, or you have one in your family, you're kind of just at the whim of headlines and ChatGPT. So today, what I really wanted to do was bring together some amazing, talented practitioners. Between the 3 of us, we have led people and talent across the US, Canada, and Europe. We've got experience across retail, tech, healthcare, and the energy sector, and consulting. And so my hope is that we can try to answer as many questions as you guys might have. But we're going to do a brief kind of introduction to what we believe is happening in the job market overall, and give you the 411. Now, one of the other things that's really important to me on Reimagine Success is that this is a no gatekeeping conversation. So we are going to be as honest and forthcoming and transparent as we possibly can. And these are the types of things that, again, you often don't get to access or hear anywhere else. So without further ado, I would love to introduce my guests. And one is a new friend that I just met, and another is a very old friend. So I'll start with the old friend. So Laura Hammond and I met, I don't know, Laura, has it been like a long time ago? And it was in Chicago.
9 or 10 years. Yeah.
Yeah. So we met at a Great Place to Work conference in Chicago. We became immediate BFFs because we both worked for Swedish companies at the time. She was the head of people at H&M in Canada. I was working for IKEA in the US. And we kind of had the Swedish love story. We had the Swedish love story. So it's about Laura, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Great. Well, yes, as Nabeela said, my roots are in the retail industry. I've spent the majority of the last 15 years working with multi-unit hourly populations across great brands like H&M and Aritzia. And then my most recent corporate gig was for a health tech company called Tia, where we scaled the company from 67 employees all the way up to almost 400 when I left. And since then, I've started my own people and culture consultancy called The People. And I work with brands across industries, offering fractional HR support, advisory, and then project-specific support now. And I'm really excited about this conversation because my world of work has changed. So I'd love to impart some of my wisdom to this group. And I know that Cindy's world has changed recently as well.
Yes, it has. And we haven't had a chance to catch up. So we'll kind of do this in this public forum. But I'm Cindy Gordon, and I'm currently Chief People Officer at a clean energy startup called Madison Energy Infrastructure. I'm pretty newish to the role. I joined in early February of this year. Prior to that, I was a people consultant and I was living in LA, and I worked with PE and VC backed startups of all sizes and stages of growth, or I guess downsize growth of given chaotic times. And before that, I spent 7 years in the tech startup space at InsurTech, um, an InsurTech company based in New York called Policy Genius. And then before that, I was at Oscar Health. And then before that, which feels like many moons ago, I spent 15 years at McKinsey and Company. And now I've flipped back to being in New York City. So just to catch you up, Laura. But I'm so excited to be here today. Thank you for having us. And thank you for creating this community and environment for people to be able to like feel more equipped and empowered to find whatever's next for them.
Thank you. And I love that, again, we've got US, Canada, Europe across the board here. So super exciting. So let's just start with your hot take. We see the headlines, AI is disrupting everything. Youth unemployment is at an all-time high in most countries. We see layoff anxiety at its peak. Just your hot take, like, things feel out of balance right now. So how would you describe current state workplace? Laura, do you want to go first?
Yeah, what came up to me as as I was reflecting, preparing for the call, is pendulum swing. I can think of 5 years ago now when companies were doing everything they could to attract and retain workers during that sort of pandemic, great resignation era, and workplace wellness and focus on flexible working arrangements was all the rage. And now we're seeing that the power really is back in the hands of employers as they're looking to automate, streamline, get more digital support for tasks through AI. And they're asking employees to come back to work. And so we know that folks' lifestyles have changed, and that may not be, an in-person work environment may no longer be practical based on where you have chosen to live and make your life. And so it's really for workers, it's really trying to stay one step ahead of what skills are relevant now and how to position yourself so that you're the most attractive candidate in a very flooded job market.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and that resonates. Yeah, when I was preparing for this, the first phrase that came to mind was the workplace is in an identity crisis. It's like, and it's similar, like the pendulum swing. It's just going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Sometimes it like hovers in the middle, but it's another analogy I might use is like we're on this like high speed train and there's this winding track, and while it can be really exhilarating for some people, it's nauseating for others. And we haven't gotten back to finding, or nobody's spent enough time focusing on how we can better align the drive, like the desire for velocity and business with humanity. Mm-hmm. And it's creating a very like psychologically unsafe set of environments for people. And I find what's interesting is like, we've all been in the workforce for a number of years collectively amongst the three of us anyway, and I'm assuming the same is for those who are listening. But what is not new is the speed itself, right? We've always like had to like figure out how to be a higher performing environment. But the difference is the layering of all of the disruption. There's like all these additional layers of complexity, whether that's economic uncertainty, it's the social dynamics and change, it's hybrid work or maybe not hybrid work, make up your mind, or AI. And so it's like we can no longer ride one wave out. It's a constant cross current of sorts. I'm using a lot of analogies, but so like I think the shift here needs to be away from what we used to be able to do and be more equipped to do, which is predict the future of work, and just focus on the now and how to be adaptable to change, because there's so much that we don't know that is going to hit us from left and right and behind and in the front. And like developing high trust cultures that can flex as conditions shift. There's only so much that we can do, but if we can focus on how we react to change and build that trust with our employees, I think that can go a long way.
Yeah, I think the reference or the analogy that I give is just like it feels like whiplash. So Laura, you talked about it, Cindy, you talked about it, is nauseating. I think that's also a really good reference as well. I wrote about this a few weeks ago, which is I was coaching a client and they were trying to decide between staying in corporate or going out on their own. And they kept saying, well, I don't know if I'm ready to give up the stability of a paycheck every 2 weeks. I was like, what stability are you referring to? And I think that that is that reality that the stability of, I think, quote unquote, a traditional job is somewhat fading away, if not fading away
Yes.
entirely, especially for young people. I think a lot about young people entering the marketplace now. You should expect to have at least 4 to 5 different career phases. And the idea that you can even just prepare for what the third or fourth or fifth one is just, I don't even know that you can. And so I think that
Yeah.
that is just, I don't know that we've really wrapped our heads or arms around like what that means. I don't know if you have some thoughts about that, like portfolio career and the reinventing yourself multiple times and like the instability of what used to be a traditional job. What are your thoughts just on that?
Mhm.
Cindy, like, do you want to, like, because you both speak about that, but it's like, has that reality really like come to fruition? Like, have we come to fruition with what that reality is going to look like yet?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know that we have. I think we're still thinking about employment in a traditional sense. And I think that higher education also reflects that. I don't know that colleges, or as we call them in Canada, universities, have adapted their program to give graduates enough practical skills. And there are still programs that, are enrolling students that don't really have great outcomes in terms of jobs for grads. And so I think we need to be thinking about education and experience a lot differently. And if I were a young person just starting out, I'd be thinking about learning skills that I can bring to employers, like I would be experimenting with AI, how to create, custom GPTs for workflows and whatnot. I would be learning skills like, video editing and, maybe, oh gosh, I name it, but to have sort of a side hustle or something that could help me bring in income while also helping me to gain a skill that I can demonstrate to employer that I am adaptable, I'm a self-starter. And then I'd be looking to meet with as many folks as possible to learn about what type of different jobs are there out there, what industries am I interested in, and how can I gain practical skills that will make me as attractive as I can as a candidate.
Yeah. Absolutely. I tried to create my own app with natural language AI, and I got pretty far. I was actually really impressed with myself. I got stuck when it told me I had this screen up with the AI tool that was helping me create the app, and then I had my other AI tool up.
Right.
I was Q&Aing myself as I was going through it, and then when ChatGPT told me to open up the developer console, I knew I was like
Right.
I was toast. I was toast. I was like, okay, this isn't gonna work. I should probably stop at this point. But Cindy, what are your thoughts in terms of like early career?
Yeah.
How do we help people figure this out?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what you both said, right? Like, again, like I think this takes us, and what I had said earlier about living more in the present. We're in a highly tech-enabled, AI-enabled world these days, and the skill sets that are valuable to organizations don't look the same as they did 10 years ago. And so relationship IQ is going to be like one of the most critical skill sets that people need to be able to have, because technical skills can easily be replaced through AI. So I think choosing, and like, I think we can get stuck in, I have to make a decision and this is like a life altering decision. So, like what you said earlier, Nabeela, about like, we can't plan ahead. Like, I can't plan ahead. And I've been working for like 20 plus years. So I think like living in the present, choosing something that like really suits what your needs are in the moment and being honest with yourself and identifying what those needs are up front, I think are really important. We all have different responsibilities. There might be financial responsibilities. There might be skill sets that you want to build, but what are those critical building blocks that you want in the moment where like, and understand that like, you're not making this lifelong commitment in whatever job is next. But like what's worse is if you're not building skills in a practical setting
Yeah.
because you're spending time over analyzing and trying to find the perfect thing. And I agree with what Laura said about building your own personal board of directors. Find peers, find mentors, find role models. That's part of developing the relationship IQ. Again, because of technology, we are often blocked from like building meaningful relationships. But the way I've seen it to date, and that hasn't really changed, is a lot of job searches are based on the relationships that you build and how you can like showcase your best self and tell that story. So like focus on telling the story too.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to switch a little bit before we move on to you know Q&A. I want to talk a little bit about middle managers because there's another statistic that I talk about where middle managers or your manager, however you want to describe it, is by far the greatest factor of your work health, right? They, by a large degree, Gallup talks about to the 70s, by 70%, can indicate your success and your health at work. But middle managers are also really getting stressed. I mean, they're squeezed between realistic, I mean, almost like you said, this speed of change that's happening and expectations that are consistently growing, and then teams who want certainty and transparency and some kind of stability, and they're squeezed in the middle and they're feeling that stress at a higher rate than ever before. So what's your thoughts just on the middle manager role and how that's going to change? Is it going to exist, and how do middle managers navigate it?
Mhm. Yeah, I feel like it is one of the biggest indicators of whether an employee stays at their job, right? Like how good their manager is. But yet, companies don't spend enough time enabling and developing managers. So there's some disconnect there, and I like think of them as shock absorbers for an organization. And
Yes.
it's such a tough transition to go from an individual contributor where you're used to producing work and then shifting to this selfless role where you also have to like lead and be responsible for others. It's a totally different set of skills. And so I think it's an age old problem, to be quite honest, but there
Mhm.
is more and more that's being placed on managers and quite honestly on people teams, right? Like
Mhm.
to cover all of the weight of everything that's happening and the lack of predictability. So one mindset shift that is a tactical thing is like shifting away from I must deliver out all the outcomes to I must enable all of the outcome. It's even like just that constant reminder, put it on a post-it, sit it in front of you to like reframe what you're doing and the impact that you can have in your role. I think that's one thing where you remove yourself from having to be the subject matter expert, and you might be looking to others on your team to teach you something. And
Mhm.
that's like a big ego shift too. But like once you grow into that, and I don't think people manager roles are for everybody. Um, it's a totally different skill set. And if you really like being in the trenches and producing the work, then questioning whether a people
Mhm.
manager role is right for you is one of the first steps, I think.
Mhm. And that's really good advice because I think a lot of people just naturally think that that's just the ascension model, right? Like they have to go through that process,
Mhm.
but it really isn't for everybody. Laura, what's your take on the state of middle managers? And
Yeah, I mean, I always think about I very very similar to Cindy's take about being in a vice grip, right? You've got the expectations of management and leadership, and then you've got the expectations of your team. But and I think for a lot of Gen Zs who are entering the workforce, it's not really an attractive job. There's been a
Mhm.
couple of articles recently about how they're refusing middle management positions, or that's not the path they're wanting to take. But I tend to think of like, okay, if this is an area that would enable me to get more access to opportunity, build my wealth, my personal wealth. And if it's something to which I feel a natural inclination in leadership, how can I make it more palatable? And I think there are ways that individuals can request enablement from their organization or build it for themselves if they're not getting it. And I do think that that's a failing of most organizations, that we don't think enough about that middle manager. And so things that I would do would be to ask, if you're taking on a role, ask what support is available from HR to orient you to company policies and the types of things that you're going to have to manage for your team, whether it's time off, whether it's performance management, et cetera, and ask for a really good orientation to those programs. And if it's not something that's readily available in terms of manager training, ask for it. I would also invest in getting myself a coach or working with a mentor who can help guide me through some of the softer skills, or, the first time that you have a really challenging employee on your team or a really challenging senior leader to whom you're reporting. How do you manage those stakeholders appropriately, and what are some tactics that they've used before that have been helpful to them, speaking points and whatnot. And then there are also a lot of professional communities that you can join that are also really helpful in terms of peers, to ask them, what have you tried? And then also make the business case for leadership training. There's great coaching available from places like Life Labs. They have a manager development series that's fairly inexpensive for a lot of organizations, and create the business case for why leaders at your level need it.
Yeah, I think it's a good call. At the same time, like you said, Cindy, this is an age-old problem. Like we've always somehow the middle always gets squeezed, and then, like you said, that I think that the shock absorber is a great analogy as well. But if you want to be able to do it successfully and it not be such a stressor, I think upskilling yourself. And I think that's actually the theme that I see at this point in time. Like, it is the burden of responsibility is on the individual. Like, if you're waiting for your organization or some program or some training or your university to teach you how to navigate the workplace, or get into middle management and do that successfully, you're going to be waiting for a real long time, because most organizations haven't figured it out yet or have been struggling with it for a really long time. And I think universities, Laura, as you said at the beginning, are way behind. I want to I want to send a letter to every dean who's still running a program to create a job that they will likely not exist in 4 years, and just tell them to stop. Like, I was I was speaking at an event, and young lady came up to me, and she had just finished a 2-year program to be an entry-level data analyst. And I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, I literally felt like pain for her, because the time and the money and the energy, she's now graduated with something that she will likely never get employment from, because she's up against people who have a lot more seniority as data scientists. And so if you're looking for an entry-level data analyst job, that's just like, I felt so bad for her. So I was really told her, it's like, you probably need to go back to the drawing board and figure out, how do you continue to get the education to up level yourself, because I just don't see that future for you. So I think that's a type of career that I think a lot of people are being pushed into, because we thought data scientists were going to make more money than CEOs at some point, right? So, or at least that was the headline. All right. So I get a lot of questions, and Laura, this is also where I'd love your thoughts. Is, should I stay, as I said at the beginning, in a corporate, job, or should I go out on my own and try the creator economy and become a solopreneur or a fractional, fractional professional? Laura, you've made that pivot. Your thoughts, reflections on that question. I'm sure you get that question all the time from people too.
Yeah. And I would say, I think my journey is unique, and it's not unique in the sense that I am, at the time that I made the decision to go fractional, I was a single person, and what I needed to worry about was my rent. And other than that, there weren't people I was trying to provide for. I didn't have a mortgage that I was committed to, and those types of things. But I would say it's the best decision that I ever made, because I learned to rely on myself. And I think, as we've been chatting about, this is something that we all need to do right now, is to learn a skill that can sustain us if the job market is not working in our favor, or if we're long time between that corporate job. And so I would say, First and foremost, it's important to find your niche. I had a hypothesis, and I also had spent a hypothesis that more companies were going to need the type of support that I could provide. And in an environment, when I started in 2023, when VC and PE funding had contracted for companies, I thought there's going to be a lot more startups that are hiring fractionally instead of hiring out their all those expensive C-suite salaries. That has shifted a little bit now, but I would say there's still a need because there's a lot of people that are leaving their corporate jobs to go fractional. So there's gaps in leadership teams. So what I would say is find your niche and think about the service that you can provide that is unique, that is compelling, and that companies need. And then I would also say before you take the leap, go out and build your network and start with a couple of contracts, because what some folks in my fractional world have found is that they've done the solopreneur thing and found that they didn't really like it. And then I think the third thing is to recognize that you can do this at a fairly low cost, but there will still be costs. You may need things like health insurance. That's a big thing that, a cost that was quite significant for me that I had to pay because I was single. If you're in the US. In Canada, it's a bit of a different story, but you're going to need to think about how you're keeping your books, and you might need a bookkeeper support there. So you need to kind of think of a budget and what your running costs are going to be and what your runway is to really give yourself an effort, because a chance to put in the effort. Because for me, it did take about 4 to 6 months for things to really get going and to get close back to what I was earning corporately. But the upside was that I quickly was able to achieve that and even surpass it with a lot more flexibility. So
yeah, that's really great advice. I just to give an example, to be really practical about niche, Laura, in your case, can you just talk about your niche? And I think it's a perfect example of like what it could look like.
Right. And I tried to be all things to all people at first. And so I'm really trying to narrow my niche. So right now, I would say the niche that I'm going after is companies with hourly populations that are expanding their workforces from Canada into the US. So I'm helping a lot of retail and wellness companies learn about the US market, help build their strategic plan for US entry, and then providing HR services to them once they enter.
Yeah, but I think that's a perfect example. And so I wanted people to hear when you talk about niche, just the level of specificity and thought that went into your niche. And so I think that's a formula for success, right? Because if you try to do everything for everybody, just like you said, you fall into this like broad category where you don't stand out and people won't be able to find you. Cindy, I'd love to hear your thoughts from the corporate boardroom, CHRO perspective. What's your thought on fractional work, contract work, how that fits into corporate life looking forward, or at least in the next like 12 to 24 months?
Yeah. Yeah. And I did my own gig for 4 years. Also, so I have some thoughts there too. But like being an operator, in my seat again, I actually have multiple um, consultants working for me to augment my team. I work for a PE-backed startup that is Swedish, by the way. So we have a Swedish connection here. But
I didn't know that.
I know. And sorry, I'm on a panel. Um, so I realize that especially for PE-backed startups, that like you can still create value without adding additional headcount to your team. So it's very like when I worked at VC-backed startups, it was hyper growth, and PE-backed, it's running lean, and largely I think that's how a lot of companies are running today, even in the VC world. And so how can you run lean, but where can you like flex up or flex down when there are like peak crazy times at work, and when you need more help, and then where can you downsize when you don't need the help? And so I found that leveraging contractors is a great way to augment the team when necessary, but then not take on the increase and like burn if you'd had a constant burn rate. So through salary. So it's really helpful that way. And I think in up or down markets, having consultants is helpful. There's always going to be turnover in the people space in particular, but I've seen that across the board, especially at rapidly evolving companies that are constantly making change. They are quick to want to bring in variable cost support. So, and then in up times, we've seen it where like a light gets to shine down on our profession, and we get to go do the exciting things maybe for a hot second. So I think it's really useful. I do think like as an operator, like there are pros and cons to it, but I found great use cases for it at my current company. There for those who are not in the people space or are not professionals in the people space. Contractors aren't a replacement for full-time employees, so you shouldn't expect the same amount of commitment from a consultant, number one, and you shouldn't like expect them to be there for you 24/7. They have other clients to do unless they've committed to that. Having been in the consulting role myself for 4 years, I think there are different reasons why people go into that go down that route. Some are looking to make that a permanent like way of working. Others are burnout, quite frankly, and they want a break and they want some flexibility. And then others are like, I don't know, but I want to test it out, right? And
Yeah.
so I think going solo isn't freedom from structure, though. It's you have to build your own. So that's what Laura was saying. And there are certainly pros and cons. I loved it. I loved the flexibility. I was burnout. That's why I did it for the short stint that I did. And it really helped me carve out time for myself. I hated the back office admin components. I hated invoicing. I actually still have a client I haven't invoiced for about to 2 years ago. This is how much I hate it. Yeah, that's a problem. But and it felt lonely. So I like I did subcontractors at a point too. So if somebody's considering dipping their toes into going the fractional or consulting route, you can also just tack on to another consultant and be a subcontractor for them to apprentice a bit. So that could be a route. The other thing I'd say is the cash flow piece is more cyclical. So you really have to be thoughtful about how you're budgeting because you're not getting a steady salary to paycheck unless you've set it up. And I highly suggest that you try to go a retainer route if you can to try to replicate that. But otherwise, cash flow based on like payment accounting cycles and stuff can throw things off. It took me a good year to get my bearings. And the beauty is there's room for all of us to do what we want to do. I started out doing whatever I wanted to try to drum up business. And then I realized I much preferred advisory work than I liked fractional work. So I started doing advisory work instead. And then I switched it when I got bored and picked up a fractional gig when I wanted a little bit more. So like the beauty is you can do whatever the heck you want.
Yeah.
So that I love that flexibility and miss that a little bit.
No, I think
lot.
that's the advice that you guys just gave is gold. I mean, I've been also a solopreneur now for almost 2 years, and I think it's like spot on. And the reality is that there is a lot of structure that's required. So if that's not your cup of tea or you struggle with it, you need a workaround plan, or you need to build your strengths to be able to do it. I think it's hilarious that you still have a client you haven't invoiced though, Sydney. I'll happily send them one for you.
I just spoke it. I spoke it into existence so I would actually do it.
I think what else is really interesting, though, is that there was an era of time where that kind of consultant, solopreneur, advisory stint on your resume may have been looked at like, oh, you did that because you were unemployed or got laid off and you couldn't do anything else. But now I think that the aura around fractional work and solopreneurship and consulting, independent consulting is different. So like, I think I think that's something else to be aware of. Like the hiring manager, the HR practitioner isn't going to see that on your resume and think that, have a negative connotation about it by default. And I think that has shifted, and that's a good thing, at least for those that want to try doing it. If you guys would agree, as you nodding heads, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think, for anyone who's like, and I love, Cindy, what you said too, which is like, there's multiple reasons why you would try it. You're burnt out. You just want to test it out, or, you want the freedom and the flexibility, and everything in between, all of those things.
Mhm.
All right. So we've been running now for half an hour. I just want to open it up because the real, intention behind this was to do a Q&A and to answer questions from those that are listening. So we have 15 people who've been watching. So thank you for joining us. You've got 3 CHROs, 2 ex-CHROs in the corporate world, now solopreneurs. Cindy, who's currently in seat as a CHRO in the US, but also has done the solopreneur gig as well. And we really are here to answer your questions. We'll take any and all questions that you guys have. So for those who are watching, feel free to type in what those questions are, and we'll do our best to answer them. I see a few folks that are active on the Substack, so I'd love to hear your questions. I'm not going to call on anybody. And I actually have to figure out, how do I see your questions here as well? So give me a second. Has anyone asked a question?
I don't
I
I
just see
just see
people that have joined.
joined. And Rachel said she loves this topic. Thank you, Rachel. And
Oh,
Jeff
Rachel, so you
Mead
do.
said
It'll just show
excited to
up
be
right
here.
under your name. So yeah. So who's got a question about their career, the job market, the dizziness and nausea of it, the headlines, your thoughts about it? Um, Feel free to put your questions in the chat at any point in time. While we're waiting for questions, because I do hope they start coming in. Thanks, Jeffy, for being here. I want to talk a little bit about the burnout factor, and Cindy, you mentioned it. There's research to say that the anxiety around anticipating layoffs is actually worse than the anxiety of experiencing a layoff, and there's a lot of layoff looming in the world today. A lot of instability. You know, I know people look at HR and their manager with almost some kind of desperation, looking for certainty and clarity, which is like the one thing you often can't give people. And when I was in that situation, I would just tell people, either I don't know, which when I said that was the truth, or I know and I can't tell you, which was also the truth sometimes. But just some thoughts for people experiencing that kind of layoff anxiety, anxiety after layoff, burnout. Just what are your thoughts on, and how do we help people manage all of that?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. This is something that I've been thinking a lot about because I too have struggled with burnout. And what I've realized for me is that it's cyclical. Like I sort of push myself really hard, I crash, and then I go into burnout again. And so I think it's really important for us to all learn resiliency skills and burnout prevention, because although you might not be burnt out at work, you might be burnt out on the news or things happening at home, or your schoolwork, whatever it is that might be a central theme in your life right now. And so I think for all of us, having some sort of mindfulness practice, we know the research tells us that this is incredibly helpful. So whether it's meditation, whether it's journaling, whether it's taking time to do something just for you, going for a walk in nature to care for yourself, I think is really important. And then I think the other thing that we all need to focus on in such a challenging time, socially, politically, in the job market, is to focus on what we can control every day, which is I can show up and do my best today. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but I can do these 3 things for myself today to make sure that I am healthy and well, that my loved ones are cared for, and that maybe I'm developing a bit of insurance plan for my future, whether it's learning that new skill or putting that extra $10 away from a paycheck, as little as you can, so that you know that it's there if you need it. Because I think what we've seen is that the pace of change is rapid. We probably never predicted that we would live through a pandemic in our lifetime. And we can look at the past to show that we're resilient and that we can get through that. And so what are the things that I can do today to make myself feel safe and healthy? I think that's all we can control.
I give that advice to folks all the time, like having a career insurance plan. Like,
Mhm.
we have insurance plans for our health. You actually did professional insurance plan, again, with the instability of the next decade of work and whatever that's going to look like. So that is multitude of things. You talked about it, Laura, in terms of like financial runway, as whatever you can put away, will help, but also a skill runway. And actually, Uzma just asked this question. It was laid off about 8 months ago, and obviously the market is tough, but she's taken that responsibility we talked about at the beginning, which is you have to take responsibility for your own skills and development. She's upskilled herself, reskilled herself, but it's also a change in industry. So her question is, how does she build credibility in a new industry, even if her skills are transferable? So she's done exactly what we tell people to do: go out there and reskill yourself, even if it means an industry change. But now she's in a new industry without that industry experience. So what are your thoughts or advice for that? Cindy, do you want to take that one?
Sure. Yeah. I think I like the fact that there's already acknowledgement there. Like, I have transferable skills, but how do I like tell the story on that? And I think it's really honing the story. How can you lay out, like, if there is a job that that you want to crack into in a new industry, and you see that job spec, kind of mirror what is laid out in that job spec, through how you showcase your skills and your experience in your resume. I think AI, ChatGPT, is a huge a huge tool to leverage, to help create that and tell the story. But that's spending time, connecting the dots for others to get ahead of the narratives that they might have or preconceived notions is huge, whether that's in the form of like being a cover email accompanying your resume. If you can tell that story through your resume, I think that can go a long way. I also think like the more you build up your community within that industry and you learn more about people's paths, you start building connections. The more you immerse yourself in it, the more you will be able to more naturally hone at telling your story and understanding all of the skill sets that you have. There are so many transferable skill sets, and I do think the work world and the right companies that people should work for are looking more at intrinsics. And I think, Laura, you were talking at the top of our conversation around like key skill sets. I think it's a learning mindset, transferable skills like communication, relationship building, um, collaborative mindset, problem solving ability, like problem solving through ambiguity, adaptability to change. Like, if you have some of those core things, then just shape them and frame them in a way that is attractive to companies. So I think that can go a long way. Also, if there are like opportunities to do off season internships with companies, doing some contractor work if you can, to monetize some of your skill sets and get some practice in to see if you really like it. Kind of what we were talking about before about fractional consulting work. Test it out before you dive in. That might be a good way of assessing as well.
Yeah, and I think so. I agree with ChatGPT being helpful, and I mean, I will go even as far in maybe a future post to put in some prompts that you guys can use in that preparation process. But you mean it could be as simple as uploading the job profile of the job that you are looking at, then you upload your resume, and I would also upload your specific situations that you've had that relate to that job profile. So defining them in terms of this was a situation, this is the action that you took, this is the result, and something interesting that you learned or impact that you had. So there's this framework you can use. And then you ask ChatGPT to kind of, translate your experience and your real life scenarios into that job spec. So, and then it's up to you, Cindy, like you said, to tell that story in an authentic way. The other suggestion, and Laura, you talked about earlier, join professional industry networks, industry, any kind of industry specific programs that you can to just embed yourself even more in that new industry and sector. So that's great. Megan Newman is on. Thanks, Megan, for joining me. Megan, congratulations on your promotion. Megan and I have worked together. She works for Women in Communication and Technology here in Canada. She just got promoted to VP there. So congrats, Megan. And she's
Congrats.
asking, how can employers better support people they must lay off beyond kind of the traditional compliance? So is there
Mm-hmm.
anything that's differentiating with all the layoffs that you guys have through that is
Mm-hmm.
differentiating in terms of how you support people through layoffs? And I would say this is an era that is ripe for disruption. So if there's out there who's interested in, post layoff support, that thing is still operating like from the 80s. Someone
Yeah.
needs to go out there and
Mm-hmm.
disrupt that. um, Laura, you want to go first? What is something that leaders and managers or organizations could do that helps differentiate how they support people they must lay
Yeah.
off?
Absolutely. I mean, depending on the resources available within the org, I think alumni networks are really great. It can be very helpful because you never know when you're going to need to tap back into the skill set. I recently had a client that needed to reorganize a division. They did a number of layoffs in that division, and then they had some exits with some of the employees that they retained, and they were able to go back to the pool of folks that they had just laid off and rehire. So maintaining an alumni network, and also for companies that have are VC or PE backed. Sometimes there's portfolio companies that are looking. So leveraging, typically a VC or a PE will have a talent partner, leveraging that talent partner to make introductions to other portfolio companies. Or are there other companies in your industry that are growing? If yes, can the HR leader or leadership team within that or your organization make contacts with that other organization and share talent lists? Cindy and I know each other through an HR org, and we're also always very good at sharing lists of available talent in those in that network, so that our peers can pick people up that are really great. I do think, Nabeela, as you said, like the Knightsbridges of the world, that career coaching, old let's do your resume. I think working with more next gen type career coaches that are teaching the skills that you just mentioned, how to leverage ChatGPT in your job search, how to maximize your LinkedIn profile, teaching those soft skills like networking. I really, that cheesy saying, your network is your net worth, getting out, helping people learn those skills of how to meet folks in companies that are hiring and get their faces in front of people IRL. I think that is a skill that is being lost with so much digital interaction. That would be really helpful. So those are the things that I would recommend to companies. And I think those are more tactical elements than just saying, here's your resume prep and your career coach. Did I miss anything,
Yeah,
Cindy? Is there
absolutely.
anything that you would recommend?
No, I love all of what you said. I do think building alumni networks, depending on how large the layoff group is huge. There's also a company that pools alumni groups and then produces a larger pool of talent that's aggregated across participating companies. It's a company called Boomerang. So that could be a place for candidates to um, or for companies to look at and supporting, but also a place where potential employees who are impacted can ask their companies to form. I think it's such a tough time to be whenever somebody is laid off. It's a huge hit to somebody's like mental state, and then they have to like figure out what's next. So it's a really tough time. But what I would say is like I haven't looked at stats, but the likelihood of somebody being laid off is quite high. So I think many people aren't strangers to this, and so finding, and I keep coming back to this, but finding community. So one thing that I've seen some peer groups form are job seekers groups, and they form their own cohorts, and then they share ideas, and they also have accountability partners in that group to keep them on task with, okay, what did I do this week? And if you break down, so we all have a tendency to catastrophize as human beings, and the anxiety is real. I'm like at the front, in the front seat on that train. But the more we can just break down job searching into micro actions, I think can be helpful. And companies, quite honestly should like maybe I should work on this. Like we create like a checklist of sorts for somebody to follow, like a project plan to look for their next job. And I feel like companies should be connecting people to peers and offering that up. And if that isn't happening, this is the time to build the confidence, even if it feels shot, and asking your company for those things on your way out. So don't shy away from asking for what you need. Most of the time, companies don't know what the heck they're doing unless they have a really good like consultant, like Laura or you, Nabeela, like in place to like guide them through, or if they have like a people team, and a lot of companies don't. So then we have to take the onus as impacted employees if we're being laid off to ask for what we need and see. Those are like
Yeah.
lower cost items, to be quite honest, right? Some people want to be paid for 18 months. What's the trade off? Oh, then give me more like peer connections. Put me into this alumni
Yeah.
group. Like those are cheaper options.
And I think it goes back to this, what we started and to talk about, which is to see your career, even if it's in a corporate context, as a temporary experience. So your corporate career will at some point get disrupted, whether it's by a layoff or downsizing or an acquisition, or you get burnt out and you need a break. So it's, how do you prepare for that interim or the next phase of your search? And so if you can accept and anticipate that you will likely have to do multiple job searches through your career life, and there are some core things that you should prepare for in that process. And I think, Cindy, like you said, there should be a very easy way to create a checklist. I'll put that on a future post for folks. And then love, Cindy, you and Laura's
Yeah.
add to anything that I forget, both for the individual and for the HR person. But these are just basic things that you're always going to have to do. And I constantly get surprised by how many even senior leaders um, are not on LinkedIn or don't have an online profile or don't have any kind of like assets that describe their point of view or their brand or their perspective. And that, in essence, inevitably, whether we like it or not, is a baseline thing that needs to be in place today for most folks. Jeppy, you asked a question about avoiding burnout because we tend to address it after it surfaces instead of really preemptive. Jeppy, I've got 45,000 words and like 300 articles for you, but you actually answered the question, which is not to tie your identity solely to your career. Because when you are enmeshed with your career and you are your job and your job is you, then your actual ability to be resilient when that job gets disrupted is really low. And so to broaden your resilience for that job disruption, whatever, because it's inevitable, is to widen the definition of your identity and to widen the definition of success. So actually last week or the week before, I gave a tool on my Substack to help you start to define this multidimensional identity. So, because anytime we tie our identity to any one thing, if once that thing gets disrupted, then it has a really detrimental effect on our mental health, our physical health. There's so many things that it leads us to more higher risks of burnout and so forth and so on. So to oversimplify it is to really redefine our identity and redefine success through a multidimensional lens. But I love, Laura, Cindy, your thoughts on that.
I mean, that resonated. I love everything that you said. It encompassed what I went through when I was healing over from burnout and doing my consulting gigs. Burnout, healing over from it took me 3 years. I was like working part-time, but it took me a long time but it felt like my only way out to take care of myself. And this might sound a little woo-woo, but like this all comes back to self-love and our personal values. We could talk to a million people. And so like, that's probably the delineation. When you build community, you're looking for that support, but you don't want to go down the path of replicating what your friend Sally is doing, because they're wired differently and have different interests and personal values and needs than you might have. And so what's really important is not looking to external sources for validation and to define what your value is. It's understanding and being honest with yourself and doing the inner work to know like what drives you, what motivates you, what gives you energy, what you value in yourself. And I think that's huge. And workplaces are um, the first, like, seemingly safer spaces to start practicing some of the hard inner work that we need to do. And I do think, like, some of my taking this new job was to take some of the tools, the healing tools that I um, conceptually understood when I was healing over from burnout, and to put them into practice. And it was a forcing mechanism for me to seek out different types of leadership, different type of work environment. Um, and I wouldn't have done that had I not taken that break for myself. So I think it's a lot of, like, inner work, and there are online resources on with tools that can help that are totally free. So there's just a lot that is out there in the ether, and feel free to, like, reach out to me, and I'm assuming we're all open to that for advice or tools. But I think that just what you said, Nabeela, is, like, totally resonant. It, that you, how much, like, the first question to ask is, like, what am I doing? Am I in the way of myself? When it comes to burnout, like, how much am I setting this precedent
100%.
and expectations for others that I can do it all?
Yeah, it is. It is. And I think this is where we have gotten it wrong in the work world, is that health and burnout through peripheral and kind of superficial activity. When in reality, the way to prevent it is there's a huge amount of inner work that needs to be happen. And then there's a lot of systemic environmental work that needs to be happen
Mm.
um, as well. But, like, it first and foremost starts with the inner work. Laura, last final thoughts on burnout and how to keep yourself healthy through it all before we close.
Yeah, I keep going back. I think the biggest lesson that I've learned is that it's an inside job, and that we have to be really cautious about thinking that next job or that next leader or that, going freelance is going to solve all of the issues. It's unfortunately it's not. It's learning how to build skills around, self-advocacy, boundaries, and then also building a life that you really love outside of work and not making it the only thing. Because on the theme of layoffs, that the hardest lesson that I've had to learn is that work does not love you back. There's always going to be a potential that you could lose your job, or that you're not going to get the positive feedback that you crave. We really have to be developing those skills internally. And at the end of the day, life shows us time and time again that our time here is short. And I think we know that in those final moments, nobody's going to congratulate you for putting in 80-hour weeks. You're going to wish you spent more time with the people that you loved and doing the things that you loved. And that's the type of life that we need to build for ourselves.
Yep.
100%. Couldn't have ended it or said it on a better note than that. Thank you so much, Laura and Sadiq, for your time, for your advice, for your counsel, for all of the feedback, for your honesty and transparency, and for everyone that joined our live, the first live. Thank you so much for being part of this community, and your comments and your questions really, I know, helped us understand what people are struggling with, but I'm sure it helped other people as well that are on this. So thank you so much, everyone, and we'll see you on the next live. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.